Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. This is to praise the Buddha as the enlightened one, fully awakened being. And this is a way to honor him. So we start doing that in the beginning of a talk or anything. So we were at the Eightfold Path as a reflective teaching. In this Eightfold Path, the 8 elements work like legs supporting you. It is not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on a linear scale. It is more of a working together. It is not that you develop panya, which is wisdom, first, and then you have panya. You can develop your sila, which is morality, virtue. And once your sila is developed, then you can have samadhi. That is not how we think, isn't it? That is how we think, isn't it? You have to have 1, then 2, and then 3 as an actual realization. Developing the Eightfold Path is an experience in a moment. It is all one. All the parts are working as one strong development. It is not a linear thing. Linear means in a straight line. You know, one thing leads one thing, second, third, fourth. Not as such, but what he's saying is that what we are saying is that it works as an organic whole, as a cyclic thing that comes in play together and conditions the mind, conditional development. So as an actual realization, developing the Eightfold Path is an experience in a moment. It is all one. All the parts are working as one strong development. So we think that way because we can only have one thought at a time. So what exactly happens sometimes is that there is an occasion where when you develop your morality or your virtue, you keep your precepts, then joy arises because you are keeping in the right behavior, right mode of living. When you're right mode of living, then happiness, non-remorse arises. With non-remorse, gladness. When there's gladness, there's tranquility or happiness or calm. When there's calm, and then you know the Buddha's teaching, then there is wisdom arising also. You see things as they are. But that is another way of looking at it, but that is when you are familiar with the Buddha's teachings. So here we just develop the whole thing organically. But even though that is said, there is the steps of morality, virtue, and samadhi, which one fulfills all the time in a sense that one works with all those elements together. So everything I've said about the Eightfold Path in the Four Noble Truths is only a reflection. What do we mean by reflection? It means you understand theoretically and you put that sometimes by understanding theoretically, you try to put that in action also in your daily activity, in your daily life. The Eightfold Path is not removed from your daily life where you have to sit in a monastery, in a temple, in a church, and do your meditation or think about spiritual things. This works in the middle of your Mexico City in the market, in the middle of the market, all these eightfold factors, in the middle of the world, in the middle of the busyness of everyday life, in the busyness of the city life, all these things can be with you and offer you the moment of working at any time, in any place, anywhere. So just don't think that you have to be in a, in a quiet place. Maybe initially for meditation practices, it's good to be in a quiet place. But for your daily life, your reflection of the Eightfold Path, of the Buddha's teachings, it can be a challenge to be used also in everyday life, and that is what changes you. So what is really important is for you to realize, what am I actually doing as I reflect, rather than to grasp things that I'm saying. It is a process of bringing the Eightfold Path into your mind, using it as a reflective teaching so that you can consider what it really means. Don't just think you know it because you can say samadhi means right understanding. Sama sankappa means right thought or right intention in a way. That is intellectual understanding. Someone might say, no, I think sama sankappa means, and you answer, no, in the book, it says right thought, you've got it wrong, this is not reflection. So it has to be realized, made real. We can translate sama sankappa as right thought or attitude or intention. We try things out. We can use these tools for contemplation rather than thinking that they are absolutely fixed and that we have to accept them in an orthodox style. Any kind of variation from the exact interpretation is heresy. Sometimes our minds do not think in the rigid way. Sometimes our minds think in that rigid way, in a fixed way. But we are trying to transcend that way of thinking by developing a mind that moves around, watches and investigates, considers, wonders and reflects. So in a way, what this means, all that, if we stop and think about it, what this means is that we become open-minded, and also by being reflective on the teaching, what it means is we absorb the teachings and we let it work itself in the mind. Slowly and gradually, it will become more clearer and clearer, and your understanding grows deeper and deeper, in the sense that things become more clear when you investigate and consider. So these things will automatically, all sink in the mind and condition the mind at the same time. So I'm trying to encourage each one of you to be brave enough to wisely consider the way things are, rather than have someone tell you whether you are ready or not for enlightenment. Why it says brave enough to wisely consider the way things are, what that means is you have to have the courage to think outside the box. What appears to us may be an illusion that we, grasp at face value without looking deeper and sorting that illusionary nature of reality out. So we need to be courageous. That's why it says brave enough to consider the way things are, rather than have someone tell you whether you're ready or not for enlightenment. When are you ready for enlightenment? When are you ready to look into the Buddha's teachings? There are many answers to that. One can, what this means is one can come into the Buddha's teachings from many different conditions. Some people come into the Buddha's teachings because they have suffered mentally or physically. Some people come because of curiosity or intellectual investigation. Some people come into the Buddha's teachings because they have learned some martial arts or yoga and want to do some meditation to develop the mind, or to bring calm or happiness, or a combination of both happiness, calmness, peacefulness. Some people come to relieve the stress because it's hectic, very stressful life. Some people come because they have headaches. Really, they have headaches that the best doctors in the world cannot cure, and they don't know what it is. So they come into the teachings to see if their headaches can be cured. And some people come because of depression, anxiety, fear, and so on and so forth. So there are many people and many reasons why they come to learn the Dhamma and the Buddha's teachings. I mean, I came because I was studying science and I understood some of the things that were talked about in the Buddha's talk that we were doing in scientific terms. It was more parallel. Buddhism was a little bit more parallel to scientific way of thinking. So I was very curious, and then I understood more and more of the Buddha's teachings, and I developed a real good appreciation of it, and here I am. So there are many ways, but one has to be brave enough in the sense of courageous to look into the teachings more deeper, not just superficially saying, okay, you know, I just want to study a little bit and see what happens. But, you know, you have to look at the Buddha's teachings from different angles to get an appreciation of the teachings. And so one has to also practice. It is very important to go back to the original source of the Buddha's teachings rather than getting the teachings from this tradition or that tradition, because, you know, you have the Buddhist teachings are scattered all over the world. In the Tibet, it's Tibetan Buddhism. In the China, it's Chinese Buddhism. Japan is Zen, Japanese Buddhism mixed with the Shinto religion and everything. And so forth in Korea, Vietnam, other places, they have changed some of the teachings. So it's very important to go back to the source, original Pali Canon, and then see the English translation or Spanish translation, which is precise translation by scholar monks or scholastic traditions that translate, you know, and to give you an idea of what actually the original source of the teaching is, rather than the traditionals of different traditions. So actually the Buddhist teaching is one of being enlightened now, rather than doing anything to become enlightened. The idea that you must do something to become enlightened can only come from wrong understanding. Then enlightenment is merely another condition dependent upon something else. So it is not really enlightenment, it is only a perception of enlightenment. So yes, it's just, of course, you have to do something to become enlightened, which is you have to practice the Buddha's teachings. And the enlightenment is merely another condition dependent upon something else. So it is not really enlightenment, it is only a perception. However, I'm not talking about any kind of perception but about being alert to the way things are. The present moment is what we can actually observe. Like I said last time, the present moment is where we have power to change the moment. The past we cannot change, we are helpless. The future we are helpless in a sense. But if we change the present or we can do something with the present, then we can control the future. And we can change our future by changing the present. And the present is continuously becoming the past. Every millionth of a second that flows now is becoming past. Now is becoming past. Now is every second, every millionth of a second, every tenth of a second, the present is changing continuously into past. So this in a sense means that it doesn't matter how old we are. We have the present moment always to make us to help us to become enlightened. It doesn't mean, you know, if I are 80, 75, that you're too old to practice enlightenment. No. What is important is that we have the present moment, and the present moment is where we can change things. So it is important that we work in the present moment. We can observe the present. We can't observe tomorrow yet. We can only remember yesterday. And yesterday is very important for many reasons. Firstly, the past, which is yesterday, can help us also. When we reflect upon the past, we see that where we have squandered our opportunity, squandered our fortune. What is the fortune in the Buddha sense is not like you have money or gold or silver or wealth. By fortune, what we mean in the Buddhist sense is our time that we could spend on enlightenment. Time is very valuable. They say, you know, time is money, but time is more than money. Time is life, and time is an opportunity for enlightenment. And when you have enlightenment, money, wealth, all these things are very inferior. They have no value compared to enlightenment. The highest in the world is enlightenment, which means the highest in the world that are praised by wise people is wisdom and compassion. These are the highest things in the world, not how much money you have in the bank, or how famous you are, or how wealthy you are, or how important a musician, president you are. None of these things. The greatest praise by the world is enlightenment, which is wisdom and compassion. Those two go together. Not just compassion, which the Tibetans emphasize. It is wisdom and compassion. Compassion on its own is probably foolish compassion. So it has to be compassion. And also when you have wisdom, then compassion is complete and compassion is deep enough and powerful enough. Otherwise, without the wisdom, it's very superficial compassion. So we have the past and we can learn not to make the mistakes that we made, not to waste our time on things that are trivial, insignificant, or even if we didn't do those things, even if we didn't look at our iPad news or this Google News or that, all the trivial things that we sometimes get lost into, submerged and drowned, they're nothing to us at the present moment. So we can reflect on the past, learn a lot where we have fallen and where we may yet fall if we continue those things again and again. So, they say that you can learn from history, and that is true. We can learn from the past and align ourselves so that we don't make the same mistakes again. So it's important to know that the present is the most important. That's why we live in the present moment more and more, so that we can develop the present moment. So the Buddhist practice is very immediate to the here and now, looking at the way things are. Now, how do we do that? Well, first we have to look at our doubts and fears, because we get so attached to our views and opinions that these take us into doubt about what we are doing. Someone might develop a false confidence, believing that they're enlightened. But believing that you are enlightened or believing that you are not enlightened are both delusions. What I am pointing to is being enlightened rather than believing in it. And for this, we need to be open to the way things are. So there are many ways to judge and many ways to know that you're enlightened. You yourself will know how much you have progressed, how much the factors of greed, the mental factors of greed, hatred, and delusions have been eradicated, how much is left, how much calmness has developed in you, how much peacefulness, how much happiness has developed in you. These are the parameters, the factors that you yourself will be able to know 100%. So that is how, in a way, you can tell of your progress. There are, stages of enlightenment. There are 4 stages of enlightenment. There is the Sotapanna, which is the stream winner, that you have come into these teachings and that you are being absorbed into this teaching so much that you will not be able to look at any other teachings anymore. Then there is the once returner, which means that he will only come to this realm one more time before he becomes fully enlightened. Then there's the non-returner, which means he doesn't come to this realm, but develops his enlightenment, full enlightenment understanding in another realm and becomes enlightened, fully enlightened. And then the 4th enlightened person is the one who has finished his job, done what has to be done, and is fully enlightened and has no more work to do. So it doesn't matter what stage of enlightenment you are, as long as you continue, and you will be continuing, because when you come into the teaching, it will pull you. You know, it kind of pulls you in, and it is a joyous path. And for this reason, and for this, we need to be open to the way things are, which is what it means is we need to be open to the way of enlightenment, or the Eightfold Path, which is another way of the way, of the way things are, and the Four Noble Truths. You cannot separate the Four Noble Truths from the Eightfold Path. It is just a natural interconnection. So we start with the way things are as they happen to be right now, such as the breathing of our bodies. What has that to do with truth, with enlightenment? Does watching my breath mean that I'm enlightened? No. We start with the way things are, is that we work with the body initially. Why do we include the breathing in the Buddhist teachings? Because it clarifies the mind. When we do the breath meditation on the breathing, on focusing our attention on the breath as it comes in and out, at the expense of the multitude of thoughts that flood into our mind from the six senses of eyes, ears, nose, all the external world that rushes like a flood and overpowers us. We are completely at the current of this mighty stream. It's like a big river flooding us from all sides. The ocean of forms, the ocean of sounds, an ocean of taste, touch, all these things are rushing towards us, and we are helpless and overpowered. So we, with the process of breathing, we kind of stabilize these forces that are entering and overpowering us. And at the expense of all that distraction and scattered of mind, we now anchor the mind to the present moment. That means we are not going to be pushed around in the rough seas of this forms and sounds and all these external elements entering and overpowering us. So it's a way of stabilizing us, of centering ours, or anchoring our minds, so that it clarifies the thinking processes. Otherwise, the thinking process is so much cluttered and so much overwhelmed that we cannot think clearly and deeply enough to look at reality. And our minds are kind of tainted so that illusions appear to be real and reality is hidden or covered. So that's why breathing is part of the Buddha's teaching. It is to clarify the mind, to develop the mind, to lead it to happiness, to give it a foretaste of what enlightenment nirvana is. Because when you do the breathing meditation, there comes a time when you have been able to control the mind and control the thinking process to such a way that craving has been abated, so that you have now control on the mind, on thinking process, on not letting thoughts scatter around, and controlling the thinking in a sense that no more thoughts arise for not 5 seconds, but 1 hour, 2 hours. And that brings us a lot of happiness, because we have now such power to control our minds, and not the other way around, that we are not controlled anymore by so many other factors that are affecting us, by craving and all that. But we have control over the craving. The tables are now turned. So, opinions, views, we get attached to that. They take us into doubt about what we are doing. But you don't have to worry about all these things. As you develop the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths, doubts and all these false opinions, false views are really removed in a sense. The more you understand, the lesser the doubts will arise, because they cannot be, the understanding and doubts cannot coexist at the same time. Where there is light, where there's wisdom, where there's knowledge, then there is no doubt, because it's not a belief system. Understanding is not same as believing. Believing and understanding are two different things. Belief, there is room for doubt. Understanding and insight, there is knowledge, there is light, there is wisdom. So doubt cannot arise in those conditions. And doubt, whatever has happened, disappears. So then you have confidence and real confidence. So as I said, that there are ways to know whether you're enlightened or you're partially enlightened, or you're on the way to full enlightenment or whatever, because you can see the progress, as I mentioned, how much you have developed and changed, and how much happiness has arisen in your life. So yes, we don't do much with the belief system in Buddhist teachings, but knowing, understanding is the highest that we praise. And for this reason, we need to be open to the way things are. You can be open to the way things are, and then the more you understand, the more open to the things and embracing that opinion, views, you'll be more open to that, because now you have certainty. Where there is certainty, doubt diminishes and is removed. So wisdom, understanding, knowledge, these things are very helpful. These factors are very helpful in your progress. We start with the way things are as they happen to be right now, such as the breathing of our bodies. What has to do that with truth, with enlightenment? Does watching my breath mean that I'm enlightened? But the more you try to think about it, figure out what it is, the more uncertain and insecure you feel. So you don't have to worry about all these things. You don't have to worry. You have to understand why watching my breath has to do with enlightenment. I just explained. It basically clarifies the mind. When you anchor your mind on the present moment, which means to the breathing process, the mind is not scattered. It means it becomes more focused in your task, in understanding, in developing, it helps. So don't worry about these things. As you understand growth, then you will see the need for meditation, and you see why meditation is important. Why focusing on the breath is a necessity for your happiness and well-being, for your mental well-being, physical well-being, and both. All we can do in this conventional form is to let go of delusion. That is the practice of the Four Noble Truths and the development of Eightfold Path. Letting go of delusion only is not enough. Letting go of greed, hatred, and delusion, which is, in other words, for being fully enlightened. But I guess what he means is, when it says letting go of delusion, is that once you let go of delusion, the other greed and hatred will fall off. So then we have glossary. And the glossary is that the Pali words that are used ordinarily in Thailand, they say Ajahn, the Thai word for teacher. It's actually Acharya, the Sanskrit word, or in Hindi we call Acharya, teacher. But Thais sometimes have difficulty pronouncing, so some of the Thai teachers use the word Ajahn instead of Acharya for a teacher or a senior monk or monks at a monastery. So it says they all derived from the Pali word Acharya. Bhikkhu is a word for alms mendicant, the term for a monk who lives on alms and abides by 20 precepts, which define a life of renunciation and morality. So we use the word bhikkhu or as an alms mendicant in the terms of a monk, a Buddhist monk. And he lives a life of renunciation, which means having given up a home and living a homeless life and observing the morality, which means the precepts. And this is what distinguishes the monk from the average, householder or the average person. And then the Buddha Rupa, an image of the Buddha. You see, there's different images all over the world. You have the Chinese version of the Buddha, which is the fat Buddha, which actually they made it fat in the sense that in the Chinese culture, being fat means you're wealthy and happy and enjoying your lifestyle. Whereas actually the Buddha was slim because you would eat one meal a day. And he encouraged monks to, kind of eat before noon and not to eat in the afternoon and evening. Since we don't do farming or carpentry or welding or some other heavy-duty work, the work of meditation doesn't require a lot of energy or food. So the Buddha would just eat in the mornings, going on his alms round with his alms ball. We had the traditional alms ball, and we go from door to door, and people want to offer because that gives them a chance to fulfill the generosity factor, the mental factor of generosity. So they give food to the monks, and then the monks give food for the minds. So the lay people, the laity, the ordinary people, give food to the monks for the body, and the monks give food, which is the mental food, to the lay people, which is the Dhamma. So it's a beautiful exchange. So the Buddha Rupa is an image of the Buddha that I've talked about. In Thai, there is the Thai Buddha. In Sri Lanka, there's the Sri Lankan looking Buddha. If you go in China, I mean in Japan, there's the Japanese form of the Buddha. So each country has kind of their own representative of what the Buddha looks like. Dependent origination, a step-by-step presentation of how suffering arises dependent on ignorance and desire and ceases with their cessation. Dependent origination, it shows how we circle around in this realm, how we keep coming into this realm and how we are stuck. And if you see the reverse cycle of the dependent arising, that when there is no birth, there is no suffering. When there is birth, there is suffering. Old age, sickness, and death. When there is birth, there is old age, sickness, and death. And lamentation, sorrow, lamentation, despair. So the ultimate causes of suffering is craving, which generates birth. And birth leads to suffering. So this we can see more clearly in our studies. And it's a very important teaching. Dhamma, the word Dhamma in Pali, it's Dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A. In Sanskrit, it's Dhamma, D-H-A-R-M-A. In Pali, it's D-H-A-M-M-A, Dhamma. It's a phenomena when seen as an aspect of the universe rather than identified with as personal. When capitalized, it refers to the teachings of the Buddha as contained in the scriptures or the ultimate truth towards which the teaching points. In Sanskrit, Dhamma, correct. So Dhamma is also, in a sense, truth, justice, righteousness, phenomenon. And when it's capitalized, it means the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha Dhamma, we call it. And it's not actually his own Dhamma that he speculated and realized or invented. The Buddha didn't invent the Eightfold Path or the Four Noble Truths. It was always there in a sense, but he discovered it and he showed it to us. Just like we can discover an ancient city that's hidden archaeologically, we can discover that, but we haven't built it or anything, we just discover it, we find it. Or that you could discover some laws. Einstein discovered the law of relativity, but he didn't invent it. He just discovered it in the sense that it was always there. Karma. Karma, the Sanskrit is K-A-R-M-A, the Pali is K-A-M-M-A. Action or cause which is created or recreated by habitual impulse, volitions, natural energies. In popular usage, it often includes the sense of the result or effect of the action. Although the proper term for this is vipaka. In Sanskrit, it's karma. So when we say karma or karma, it is the action, the activity, the mental volition, the physical volition. By body, speech, or mind, we create action every second, every millionth of a second, every tenth of a second. By our thinking, by body, by speech, or by mind, by what we think, what we say, and what we do. And this is another reason why breathing helps us in controlling our actions. So meditation helps us in multitude of ways. And this is where also it helps us in locking the energies that are contained within us, rather than going in a negative direction and influencing more and more negativity, it counters it and conditions it into a very positive, powerful force that when it's channeled more and more in the right direction, it generates a lot of happiness for us. Because we don't have any remorse. When we don't have remorse, we become happier. Gladness arises. Observance Day in Pali Uposatha, a sacred day or Sabbath occurring every lunar fortnight. On this day, Buddhists reaffirm their Dhamma practice in terms of precepts and meditation. I remember when I was in Thailand, I was a novice. I was in the same monastery, Ajahn Chah's monastery in Thailand, and I was a novice. And every 2 weeks we have this Uposatha day where we give our purity with groups of monks, and it's like a confession thing. Oh, I made this mistake, or I made a mental this, that, or whatever. I transgressed my precepts or something. And so we kind of give our purity by proxy or whatever if we can't attend. And it's a day when we sit up all night in meditation or reflective thinking, or listening to a Dhamma talk. It kind of energizes us. So I love those every 2 weeks in Thailand. I was staying in a village monastery. It was kind of forestry. It was like, a lot of trees and everything's a little bit secluded from the village. And the villagers would come and they would have a big chanting, evening meditation, and trying to stay up all night in your hut. We drink a little bit of coffee that helps us, and it's a very nice gesture to get out of the routine, really, because the routine is you go to bed at certain time, you wake up at certain time, you go to bed at certain time again, you wake up same time, same day in, day out. But here, once in a while, every 2 weeks, you kind of change things around a little bit, and it is very helpful. We used to have sauna, firewood sauna at night, so it helps with your body can sit up all night in a way. Some people the next day would sleep because it's exhausting, but it was fun, and it's always fun to do that. Observance Day, Uposatha. Tipitaka literally means 3 baskets, the collection of the Buddha scriptures classified according to sutta, discourses, Vinaya, discipline or the training, and Abhidhamma, metaphysics. So the Buddha's teachings are collected in 3 categories. There is the discourses, which is called the Sutta Pitaka. Pitaka means basket. The Vinaya Pitaka, which is the discipline or training. The monastic rules, or the lay people's rules, or what lay people observe, what novices observe, what monks observe, but it's mostly to do with the monastics. And Abhidhamma, the metaphysics, which is more scholastic teachings. So it is more codified teachings after the Buddha died, and scholars worked on the Abhidhamma and kind of made it more polished in the sense that more academically. But for enlightenment, you don't need to study all that. Sutta Pitaka, which is the discourses of the Buddha, is what we can look into. And they're very exciting and very beautiful. It shows how an enlightened person thinks, and how an ordinary average person, no matter how intelligent they are, cannot think as clearly as an enlightened being. And that is why they are stuck in this world and never come back because of the mode of thinking. So when we develop the meditation, we change the mode of thinking from an average person into a genius type of mode of thinking. That's why we anchor the mind in the present moment at the expense of all scattered thinking. We generate this powerhouse of thinking in the sense of a genius way of thinking, genius mode of thinking. That's what this meditation helps us clarify the mind and thinking processes. So the whole Pali glossary is more, of course, than what we just talked about, but these are what was in that book, The Four Noble Truths. And hence we have general idea of the Pali words and the English connotations, their English meaning. So looking at these Four Noble Truths, there's another way of looking at it. And the Noble Eightfold Path is a teaching which is imperative. What that means is the Noble Eightfold Path is saying it is imperative that you practice it. That it has not a theoretical basis, but it has a practical consequences of having understood it. And that is why we emphasize connected with that, and a part of as a part of the Eightfold Path, you have the right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, which is, the samadhi, which is the meditation that we talked about, the breathing or the loving kindness or the other kinds of reflective meditation. So we'll stop here and have a little discussion if there's any questions about any of the things that people have in their minds that they want to clear some doubts. If you have any doubts, the best way to clear doubts is to talk about it. And when we talk about it, answers come out. When answers come out, those doubts are dispelled.
I have a question, Venerable.
Yes.
How do I know when I get enlightened and it's not only my imagination trying to
Can you speak up a bit louder?
How do you know when you get enlightened and it's not an illusion of your mind?
Right. No, that's a very good question. Yes. How do you know when you're enlightened and it's not an illusion or delusion of the mind, and that it's 101% certain? How do I know that I'm enlightened? Well, there are many ways to know, and one of the ways is you look back on your life and you see how much anger you had, how much greed, or how much delusion you had, considering things. And then when you look at the present moment, when you think you have understood a lot of teachings and known and sure are enlightened, you can see the contrast. You can immediately see, nobody else has to tell you. You know for yourself. Oh man, before I was in darkness. Now I'm more happy. Now I have energy, I have light, I have, how do I say, a lot of happiness and joy. That's one of the ways. Also, the greed, hatred, and delusions are diminished to a point where, you know, if somebody says something to you, you don't get angry, don't get upset, you let go of things, and you are kind of, you know, spiritually well, in the sense of wellness of the mind. You have all the beautiful mental factors of generosity, kindness, loving kindness, you know, of renunciation, of giving, you know, of giving to others what you get. Many beautiful mental factors are there in your mind. You know that they arise more and more, and the negativities diminish more and more, and you have clarity in understanding the way things are. So 101% you will know for sure. And that if there is delusion or if you are mistaken about your enlightenment, it is easy to understand, because you may get upset very quickly, you may get angry quickly, or you may get, you know, beguiled by the delusions of the world, by forms, by sounds, by all these things that are overpowering and bind you in a sense. So there are ways to understand, and there are ways to know for sure. So it's at this point, if your practice on the Buddha's teachings and all this are just the beginners, for the beginners, it's you are starting. So unless you keep walking on this path of Eightfold Path and Four Noble Truths and establish yourself on the path, then you will see the contrast. Before becoming the Buddhist, the Buddha's teachings, and afterwards. So it needs a little bit of sufficient time for your mental factors to mature, your mental well-being to be established on the path. Then you have the contrast. But in the beginner stage, of course, you cannot tell, because you haven't entered onto the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths yet, or haven't become a stream winner, which is the first path of enlightenment. When you are, you know, the good thing about enlightenment, even the first stage of enlightenment, is that, and I may have repeated this, is that when you become a stream enterer, which is the first stage of enlightenment, you have stepped into the stream of the Dhamma. It is like a river with a current flowing this way. And that means you have sufficient knowledge in the sense of understanding. You have established yourself in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path to the point where the only direction you are going is still more and more into the Eightfold Path and Four Noble Truths until you become fully enlightened. So also what that means is at that stage of your life, you are 101% confident of the teachings, there's no doubt, and that your understanding has grown to such a point that you do not turn away from this teaching, or you go to another teacher and look into his eyes and say, does this religion help me, or does this system of spirituality help me, or this? You for sure yourself will know that this is the right teaching. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path is the correct teaching, and there is no other teaching that will satisfy my intellectual curiosity, satisfy me intellectually and practically, and that this is the only path that I can now walk on at any cost. Even if I'm offered the whole world, billions of dollars and the whole world to change my path, I cannot do that. That is a sure sign that you will be just completing. It's just that at the first stage of enlightenment means that you're guaranteed, even if you die in this, in this span of time, whatever time you have, you will become enlightened in your future life. But what this means is that within a short time, one will become enlightened, fully enlightened. So if you start with someone with zero understanding of the Buddha's teachings, zero understanding of anything connected with Buddhist teachings, but they enter the Four Noble Eightfold Path, Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, then within even 7 years, 6 years, within 1 year, it just depends, within 5 years, within 5 months, they're sure to become enlightened, or at least to either fully enlightened or partially, or to the first stage of enlightenment. So for most people, the goal is just first stage of enlightenment, because then they're guaranteed for full enlightenment anyway, because they're established in such a way that the current will just take them to the full enlightenment. The stream of the enlightenment, the teachings, the Dhamma will continue with them. So their minds have turned, their minds are inclined so much to this teaching that it can only just go in this direction now, away from greed, hatred, and delusion, basically, and into the ocean of the Dhamma, of enlightenment. So one doesn't have to worry too much about the enlightenment and how 100% we know. Once you just get into the teachings and understand and work slowly, don't worry about, don't panic about, I got to do this, there's so much to do on this and that, and poor me, I don't have generated enough karma to be able to, these are just, things that are just blocking you, just distracting you, as it were. What is important is to be with the teachings, gradually let it mature, let it grow, and then you will see for yourself the value of the teachings and the value of the meditation, and why it's important. So in the beginning, when I came into this teaching, I couldn't sit still for meditation. I couldn't sit 5 seconds and 1 minute, and then I would have to do something. So I didn't bother much about the meditation, as it were, in the beginning. I didn't even have a teacher. So what I did was to just read the books more and more and get more absorbed into it. And then there came a time when I said, oh yeah, I like to meditate, because now I know why. And I know why it's necessary. Then it becomes so easy, and it becomes a joyful experience. And then you just want to be by yourself at times and, just meditate, because it brings so much happiness and peace. So that seclusion, of course, some of my friends I had to disconnect because it was too much distraction for me. But on the other hand, I got a lot of, happiness and joy from, they say it's doing nothing. Meditation is not doing nothing. Meditation is a lot of work, but the rewards are there too. And it's a joyous work. In a sense, it is better to do nothing than to do what is wrong. But meditation is not doing anything. Meditation is not doing nothing. It is doing something that helps humanity. Because enlightened beings are needed in this world, because the world is in darkness. The whole world is in darkness. The whole world is burning with greed, hatred, and delusion. And to have enlightened beings, it's a fortune for the world. So initially, in the beginning, one has to be selfish in a way, because, you know, you have to sit in a quiet place and develop yourself. It's not being selfish really, because, you know, by developing yourself, you are going to be a big help for the whole world in a sense, because a person who cannot swim cannot help a drowning person. So a person who has to help a drowning person has to learn how to swim himself, and then he can be a big help for people who are, as a lifeguard, for people who might be drowning. So in the beginning, people have to learn to meditate, and that means you have to devote a certain amount of time for yourself. And that's not being selfish, that's being more prudent and more wise, because unless you become developed in meditation, you cannot teach others on the benefits of meditation. Then there are a lot of benefits of meditation, so you don't have to worry about anything else. You know, when people say that, oh, you're being selfish, meditating on yourself, and you should go out and help others and become unselfish by helping others. But you cannot help others because you have not helped yourself. You can go and help, do charity work, you can go and volunteer, but these anybody can do. But an enlightened being, now that is something the whole world needs. And that is why it is encouraged in the Buddha's teachings to develop yourself, and then establish yourself in the path, and then teach others, and then we can defeat sorrow, then we can bring the world out of sorrow and misery. However many beings we can help, that will be good. So yes, the question was very good, that you need to know whether you're enlightened or not, but you, 101%, you will know for yourself. And not out of delusion, but out of understanding. One more question, anyone have more questions or concerns, or are worried about certain things, about the teachings, worried about losing some things? We are what we think. All that we are is the result of our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. We create our world, and the world we create is by our thoughts and with our actions. Because with our thinking, it sets the becoming cycle. What we think, we become slowly in time. It doesn't mean that what I think now, it will happen, but it has to be a continuous kind of desire, so that we set up a chain of becoming. So we make our world by our thoughts, in the sense that the more we think about certain things, like I want to do this, 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 and I want to become like this, the more we focus on those thinking processes, we create those conditions for that energies to arise. It's nothing unusual in the Buddhist teachings. It makes a lot of sense from the dependent arising, how you see things arise from conditional thinking. And then why are people, born different? Why are some people angry type? Why there are some people delusional type? Why are some people greedy type? And why are people different? It's because of their karma, because what actions they do, those results get matured, whether it's in this life or in the future life. So Somebody's born deformed. Somebody's born in a good family. Somebody's born in a rich family. Somebody's born in a poor family. It's not that God created such a situation. It's because what we do now affects our future. We are creating our future in our present moment. Every day we have the opportunity to create our future. And so what we are doing by our thoughts and by our activities, that's why we said we are what we think. All that we are is the result of our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. So with our thoughts, even in the present time, if we think wholesome and do wholesome things, we bring happiness. If we do unwholesome thoughts and unwholesome thinking and unwholesome activity, it brings us remorse, regret, and suffering. So we create our reality, we create our future lives in our everyday activities of thoughts, speech, and action, bodily action. And then we find ourselves in our future life either born in a rich family or deformed. You know, sometimes some people are born with blind or deaf or dumb or with legs deformed, or with, sometimes you have two heads. I don't know what the name is, but some people are born joined into two people are joined into one body. All these conditions are because the activities that have been done, the productive mental activities. It's called sankharas, generating our productive mental activities. That brings us into this kind of environment. We make our world and we create our future worlds basically with our thinking. That is why thinking is very important. That is why we have to think before we have to think and reflect whether these actions are good or whether they will harm us before we do it. By body, speech, or mind, whatever we do, we have to think and think again whether it is beneficial for us or harmful for us, whether it's beneficial for others and ourselves, and then we act. But meditation helps in this way, in this sense, because it kind of generates a gap of pausing and letting us calmly think about the situation before we jump into any reaction. So that's why, people who have not developed themselves, they become more angry. People who have not developed mentally, they become more greedy. People who have not developed themselves mentally, they become more delusive. Delusion. Delusion is there always. Greed, hatred, and delusion is always there in the average person who is not understanding the Four Noble Truths of the Eightfold Path. And once they walk on that path, their greed, hatred, and delusion is diminished. So, like I said before, I think in the Buddhist teachings, we don't see people as sinners and saints. We see them as foolish people and wise. And the foolish people can become wise. They're not condemned eternally to be sinners, and that's it. So the foolish are not condemned eternally to be foolish. The foolish can become wise within a short time, having understood the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So I hope that answers, unless I didn't understand the whole question or something. It's kind of hard to hear because, the internet connection probably, and also my phone camera. it's it's a mixture of a lot of factors, a lot of karmic, a lot of things come into play. It's not a simple thing, but it's a lot of things coming into play, But basically, it's the mind and the mental factors that generate wholesome activities and unwholesome activities and wholesome conditions. So even an enlightened being has to pay back a certain amount of, karmic consequences from previous life, but that's easy to do. And the life of the Buddha, it's a very nice, beautiful stories of the life of the Buddha, which we will be doing, and the discourses of the Buddha, those are very powerful. There's a book called The Discourses of the Buddha, which is the middle length discourses. This shows how the Buddha, when somebody came to question him, how the Buddha answered. And this is the way an enlightened person answers somebody. And the discourses of the Buddha are very powerful, very beautiful book, very enjoyable and very enlightening. So we'll leave this for now. And is there any questions on meditation? Because I covered the breathing meditation. I covered the counting method. The counting method is very good and very important because it gives you an accountability of the time that we use in meditation. Because, sometimes people just sit there and their minds are all over the world. And they are being scattered so much that it shows how confused the mind is. And it's not their fault. It's not their, that's how I was. My mind was scattered everywhere and very, how do you say, very restless when I first, tried meditation. Because, like I said, I needed to read a little bit more about Buddha's teachings and generate that understanding and joyous, reflective way of looking at things before I could sit longer and longer. So it's not something wrong with you. It's just if you feel like that that you cannot meditate for even short time. It's just the way the mind is, because we have set it in such a way, in such a path that is always being distracted. But it becomes a beautiful jewel, the mind, and it becomes a very dynamic, very powerful instrument in the whole universe. The mind is the most powerful thing in the whole universe. And once we channel the energies in the right way and understand how to channel that right energy in the right direction, then it becomes like a wish-fulfilling jewel. And then you'll see the benefits of a very well-developed mind. So the breathing method I taught you initially for the beginners is just to be able to be aware of the breath as it comes in and out. And to be just understanding that breathing in and breathing out is what's happening with me. And that's what I had to concentrate, because breath is going in and out. And then if you feel like it, that you want to make it a little bit more progress in a sense, or make it a little bit more challenging, or a little bit, try to get a little bit more results, is to count your breath. When the breath goes in, you count 1, or when the breath, either way, or when the breath is out, when you breathe out, you count 1, breathe in, you count 1, breathe out again 2, breathe in 2, breathe out 3, breathe in 3, all the way to 9. The commentaries mention this. the commentaries on the Buddhist teachings. So, or, so you breathe in one, you can count one, you breathe in one out, count one, breathe in two, count two again, out, three, 4, all the way to 9. And then you come back, 1 in, 1 out, 2 in, 2 out, 3 breath in, 3rd breath out, all the way to 8. And then again, you come back, 1 in, 1 out, 2 in, 2 out, all the way to 7, 6, 5. And then you come 1 in, 1 out, and stop. Now you do that again, 1 in, 1 out to 9 again, 8, 7, 6, 5. And then let's say you're doing the 5 and you think, oh, is this 5 or 6? And you're confused because your mind was distracted or thinking about something. Then you come back again. You start all over again, 1 in, 1 out, and all the way to 9. 9 in, 9 out. So this way the mind is kind of pushed to concentrate a little bit more harder. I don't like the word punished, but I like to say more motivated to be pushed, because if you make a mistake, you have to go all the way back to 1 in, 1 out, all the way to 9. So if you do this series 3-4 times, then the mind finds it a little bit more concentrated. And then you see that you have developed a little bit of concentration. There is, of course, a little bit more path to go on, but this is just the basics. Any questions there, or if people didn't understand, or if there's a doubt on this? So you all know what it means to do the counting method. Okay. So, and then loving kindness, which is another, compassion, which is another one. So we can do the compassion method in the sense that we send out compassion to us first, and then compassion to the whole world. It's like radiating loving kindness throughout the whole world. It's not praying. We don't pray to anybody. We wish well-being to everybody. We wish everyone a sense of happiness. May everyone be happy. It's a wishful thinking that we try to send out our loving kindness or our compassionate energies or compassionate ways. It's like our thoughts are going out to the person who is suffering deeply, and that we are wishing that they come out of it. Of course, it would be ultimate thing if they could understand the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, then they can come out of suffering forever. Not just for 1 day or 2 days, but once and for all. Forevermore, that suffering is no more going to touch them. But for now, we can do what we can and generate loving kindness and loving compassion. And also there is the equanimity and sympathetic joy for the world. Then all the meditation that we will also cover is the meditation, mindfulness of death. And that is a very powerful meditation. it's in the Buddhist teaching, it's more talked about. In other religions, in other societies, death is a taboo. Nobody talks about it. But in the teachings of the enlightened, it's investigated, looked into, and talked about it and discussed. And is there a way to solve that problem of death? And when you investigate, when you analyze, and when you think about it, then you give a chance to solve it. Otherwise, if you just don't talk about it, then you don't give it an opportunity for solutions to arise. So the problem of life and death in India at Buddha's time was openly discussed, openly talked about, openly investigated, and openly looked for solutions. And the Buddha's teaching is a result of the solution to the problem of life and death. You cannot separate death from life. Life and death are interconnected. And they are forever together with us. Unless you become enlightened, then you can escape the realm of death. So we will do the compassion meditation. And in this compassion meditation, it's we are trying to receive the suffering of others. In the loving kindness, we are sending our loving vibrations throughout the world. But in compassion, we're trying to sympathize with people's suffering in a way of trying to absorb or wishing to absorb that suffering that they're undergoing, and to try to become sympathetic for the suffering of those beings. So we can start with the compassion, and sometimes it's better for people to do a little bit of the mindfulness of breathing meditation. To clarify their minds. So that you can start the breathing meditation for 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long. And then you can switch to mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of breathing meditation. Then you switch to loving kindness meditation, or you can switch to compassion meditation. So in the compassion meditation, we start with ourselves first. May I be well, successful, happy, and may no suffering arise within me that will bring sorrow. So we kind of generate a little bit of more positive thoughts towards ourselves, and to bring out a sense of acknowledging that whatever suffering that I have is not much compared to the sufferings of the world. Because there are people in other situations that are worse off than what we have. So that we can sympathize with them. But for us, it's important to know that we need compassion for ourselves in the sense that unless we become enlightened, we also are going to be in situations that are going to be of such nature that the outcome is a lot of suffering, that compassion is needed even for us. And we do it ourselves not because of intentionally, but because of, delusional. Because of delusion. And delusion, is very subtle, and it controls us in a sense. So whenever we start meditating, we sit up straight, and if you feel like you need to breathe in first and breathe out for 5 minutes, you can do so. But after a certain time, when you're more experienced in meditation, your mind is so calm that you can directly go to any of the meditation, compassion or loving kindness. So we'll try the compassion. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.